All right, everybody. Happy Monday. We have made it to the start of yet another week, and we've got some more resumes to look at for the new Seattle Seahawks head coaching position. And what we have right here in front of us is another relatively short one. We've got a couple of short ones to look at today, and short can be good. Short can be indicative of youth. It can be indicative of an understanding of the game on a level that is deeper and more well equipped for the modern era. And it can also mean that you're just not quite ready to take on the responsibility of a head coaching position. Hard to know. But young head coaches are having success in the modern NFL. And it's possible that within this crew of very young candidates, somebody could emerge as being very credible. So, we're going to do Dave Canales today. And this one's very interesting because he has basically spent his whole career with the Seattle Seahawks. He's basically spent his whole career, except for this most recent season, working under Pete Carroll in various roles. And he did a good job. And then he went to Tampa Bay this most recent year and has done a good job. In fact, he's coaching later today. So there is definitely something here. But is that something head coaching material? Is it not head coaching material? Is it head coaching material in like 5 or 6 years, but not right now? It's hard. But we're going to talk about Dave Canales for a little bit here, break it down, and see how we feel when we get to the end of the resume. The good news is we know most of this stuff because most of it was done in Seattle. The only thing that wasn't was Tampa Bay this most recent season, 2023. So Tampa Bay made a surprising playoff run behind Baker Mayfield and an offense that played a little better than expected. Let's put it that way. Baker Mayfield had the best year of his career, and Tampa Bay, despite not really being able to run the ball at all, was able to put together enough to make the postseason. So 20.5 points per game is below average by NFL standards this year, so not really good, but EPA wise, they were 12th. They had a barely positive EPA. So, what we're talking about here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is an understanding that it was assumed they would have a very bad offense because they didn't have a good quarterback, according to many, and they didn't have a good running game. And they ended up not having a good running game, but because Baker Mayfield played effectively, their offense was able to eke out a respectable showing. Combined with their good defense, it was enough for them to make the playoffs. So, standards need to be applied here. It needs to be understood that he was not working with the greatest cuts of meat. He had good receivers in Tampa Bay, but that's about it. To offer some perspective, Tampa Bay went from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield, and they didn't really lose much in terms of effectiveness or scoring or anything like that. So that was a good season for him. There's no doubt about it, and he deserves to have his name out there as a potential head coaching candidate because of that. But let's dig deeper into what he did in Seattle. Again, most of you guys know this stuff, but let's cover it in detail. So last year, 2022, his last year in Seattle, he was the quarterback coach, and this is probably his magnus opus, right? He takes Geno Smith, career backup, flamed out almost a decade prior in New York. Was his career was basically over. Geno Smith gets the starting job because he's there, and Geno Smith is a Pro Bowl quarterback, wins comeback player of the year, has a performance on the level of the quarterback that he was replacing that many people believed was impossible. 4,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 picks, highest completion percentage in the league, 101 QB rating. What he did with Geno Smith was absolutely magical, and we did see that when Canales left, Geno Smith did fall off a little bit. I don't think he fell off nearly as much as some people are pretending, but he did fall off, and maybe Geno missed Canales to a certain extent. Maybe our offense missed Canales to a certain extent. It was not as good. I think that the issues on our offense had way more to do with the offensive line than the individual performance of the quarterback. But it's very possible that Canales and Geno work well together in a way that Geno and Greg Olsen did not. So that is probably the most impressive thing he's done in his career. I would say even more impressive than what he did with Baker Mayfield this year. But both those jobs are very impressive. The 2 years prior, He was the passing game coordinator in Seattle, 2020, 2021. Now, 2021 was a weird year. We were ranked well below average in kind of the bad territory in terms of passing yardage, and our dropback EPA was slightly below average, although still positive overall, 0.053, or 0.053 dropback EPA. However, we all know Wilson got hurt. He had to play with the backup for a few games, and then Russell came back and was bad. Russell just, for about a month after he returned, did not look good at all. Couldn't really do anything. So that was kind of a weird year. 2020 was, in terms of volume stats, Wilson's best season. He had almost 4,000 passing yards, 16th in the NFL, and we had a .164 EPA, which was 10th. Not great necessarily, but I think that we are kind of learning that getting more than this out of Russell Wilson is actually somewhat hard. So I guess it's impressive in terms of the volume stuff, right? Like, if you're just talking about the passing game with Russell Wilson, some of the efficiency is going to be what really eats. It's not going to be the volume. The volume with him is going to always be a little bit rough. So, impressive year. I mean, we started out like gangbusters. Wilson was on pace to break every major passing record, and then it just fizzled out. And then in 2021, it was snuffed out. So the 2 years before that, however, and I really want to draw attention to this because this gets understated, I feel like, 2018 to 2019, he was the quarterback coach with Russell Wilson. And going into 2018, Russell Wilson, his game had gone in a bad direction. 2017, he put up good numbers, but the performance, he just didn't look comfortable. He just didn't look smooth playing the position. It was bad. A lot of the stuff was bad. And in 2018, he kind of needed to be fixed. And look at the 2 years that were gotten out of Russell Wilson with Canales as his quarterback coach. 2018, he was in the MVP race. 2019, MVP race. 2018, 35 touchdowns, 7 picks, 3,500 yards. It was a low-volume passing attack, but it was ultra-efficient, a lot of explosives, 111 QB rating, really, really good. And in my opinion, a big improvement over what he did in 2017, and he just looked more comfortable. He just looked like he was actually playing the position the way it was meant to be played, which I cannot say about him in 2017. 2019, maybe his best year. I don't think it was his best year, but maybe it was. 4,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, 5 picks, good completion percentage, 106 QB rating, finished second team All-Pro that year. So he was part of the reason why Russell Wilson was able to really get his career back on track. Because I'm telling you guys, I don't know if you guys were there or not, in 2017, it was headed in a bad direction. And he stepped in and clearly did something right. Okay, before that, he basically spent all of his time as a wide receiver coach. So in Seattle, wide receivers, I think we kind of know what his claim to fame was here. He did some great work. And he did it without working with the greatest amount of resources, right? We did spend some capital on bringing in talented receivers for sure while he was the wide receiver coach. But a lot of the guys that he excelled with were complete afterthoughts. Like, let's take a look at every receiver he had who had at least 500 receiving yards in a season. Let's start at where it began, because I think the progression here is important, and it's important to understand that we went from a team that barely used receivers to a team that used receivers a lot. So the first year that Canales is our wide receiver coach, 2010, Mike Williams and Ben Obomanu are our top 2 receivers. And look, Mike Williams at this point was considered a big fat bust. Nobody was thinking about him, and he squeezed a decent season out of him, 750 yards. Ben Obomanu, another guy who's been completely forgotten about by the NFL, got almost 500 yards out of him. I'm not going to say he got great play out of either. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't that efficient, but this is what he was working with. He was working with broken down Deion Branch. He was working with, I think Deion Butler might have been on this team. He was working with very little. 2011, he gets a great season out of UDFA rookie Doug Baldwin, almost 800 yards, 4 touchdowns. They do give him Sidney Rice, and Sidney Rice never really catches on, has about 500 receiving yards. So that ended up being a little bit of a bust. And then in 2012, Sidney Rice would bounce back a little bit and have about 750 yards, 50 catches. Golden Tate comes along in his third year, finally blows up a little bit, almost 700 receiving yards as a receiver. So we're talking about a decent expenditure on resources now with Sidney Rice, the free agent, and Golden Tate, the second round pick. But don't forget that when Golden Tate was drafted, he was viewed as being very much a project. He was viewed as somebody that needed to be developed. And you can see that going into 2013, when Tate had a 900-yard season, he was developed. And meanwhile, here comes Doug Baldwin again with almost 800 yards and 5 touchdowns in his third year, being developed from a UDFA that was a complete afterthought to most NFL talent evaluators. And then 2014, the Percy Harvin thing is completely blown up, basically never got out of the starting gates. Doug Baldwin, UDFA, becomes the top receiver on the team, over 800 yards. Jermaine Kearse steps into that number two receiver role with over 500 yards, another UDFA. And going forward, the next 2 years, Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse, and introducing Tyler Lockett, the third round rookie, were basically the wide receiver passing attack. So phenomenal job by Canales to bring along some UDFA guys who didn't necessarily come in with the most amount of talent. Doug Baldwin was definitely talented. But he really became a brilliant route runner more than anything. And Jermaine Kearse, what was he working with? Did he have 4.2 speed? Did he have 6'6" size? No, he didn't have anything like that. He was just a UDFA guy who was happy to be in the NFL. Boom, suddenly he's getting 700 receiving yards for a prolific offense. And Lockett, a rookie that, I mean, we liked him. He was clearly interesting. But look at what he managed to do with Tyler Lockett from right off the bat. Turned him into a prolific receiver on this team. And Doug Baldwin, over this 3 year period, became an elite receiver. It was a short period of time because of injuries, but he was one of the best receivers in the league for about a year and a half. And injuries did him in, and that's not really Canales' fault. He did everything he could do with Baldwin and then some, and he had Baldwin clicking. There was a point in time when I thought he was the best route runner in the NFL outside of Antonio Brown. Just an absolute monster. And then, of course, Lockett comes along underneath his tutelage, and he didn't become a stud receiver until right after Canales left the position, but you can see clearly there is development there going on with under Canales to where Lockett could get to the point where he's a 1,000-yard receiver every year for 5 years. This last year, the last guy would be Paul Richardson. He finally has a good season, finally gets healthy, finally shows his talent in 2017. Great to see. Again, I don't think there's anything to blame Canales for Paul Richardson not having good numbers previously because he always got hurt. But finally, Richardson breaks out and has 700 yards in 2017. And that is about it for the resume. It's a shorter resume, but I wanted to spend some time on this because we know this stuff, right? We really know this stuff like the back of our hand because he did most of it here. And overall, I think if you're looking at this resume, you're saying he developed Golden Tate and Tyler Lockett. He got great production out of UDFAs like Doug Baldwin and Jermaine Kearse. He helped fix Russell Wilson in 2018 and 2019. And he initially was part of the best passing attack in Seahawks franchise history in 2020 before it petered out. He got Geno Smith's career back on track. He got Baker Mayfield's career back on track. He's done really well. But is this enough to bring him on as a head coach? In the long list of guys you could get, do you really want to get a guy who has 1 year of coordinator experience and a bevy of impressive but nevertheless limited position player roles? Keeping in mind that this still isn't that great. Like the Buccaneers offense in PPG and EPA was still worse than the Seahawks. Like, when you put it like that, are you better off just making Shane Waldron the head coach at that point, right? Is that an argument? Is that something that could be argued here, that Waldron would be better off as the head coach than Canales because he's actually done more for longer as an offensive coordinator? I don't know. But it's a nice resume, and sometimes you have to take a risk, and maybe this is a risk to take. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, though. I want to hear it, because this one's going to be really interesting in the coming days, I think. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. More head coaching candidate resumes coming soon. But Dave Canales, what do you think?